What if, on a freezing cold night, you opened your front door and found a bear covered in ice, frozen in place as if it had knocked just before turning into a statue? Sounds impossible until it opens its eyes and starts to cry. This is a story of magic, a curse, and sacrifice that will send chills down your spine from beginning to end. A lonely woman, a talking bear, a promise made centuries ago, and a fate that will break your heart. Subscribe to the channel, like the video, and get ready to experience some of the most powerful stories you have ever heard. Do not miss a single moment. Winter has already knocked and the story has. The wind howled through the twisted branches of the forest, like the night itself was whispering forgotten secrets. Snow fell in complete silence, covering the world in a white, indifferent blanket. Inside the small cabin, the old clock ticked away 2:47 a.m. Each tick sounded louder than the last. Helena, wrapped in a thick robe and wool socks, sat curled up in front of the fireplace. The flames crackled softly, casting dancing shadows on the wooden walls. Her eyes followed the fire, but her mind was far away, lost in memories, in old scars, in silences that time could not erase. The forest was her chosen solitude. No neighbors, no phone signal. Just her, the wolves howling in the distance and the endless snow. Then, a deep, dull thud hit the front door. TMP. Just one. Strong enough to shake the hinges. Helena froze. Her eyes widened. Her heart raced. No one ever came. Out here especially, not at this hour. And the sound, it was not human. It was heavier, rougher, almost ancient. She stood slowly, feeling the cold creep across the floor like something alive. She grabbed her flashlight. No second knock came, just silence. Heavy, strange silence, thick as fog, pressing down on the cabin. She reached the door and hesitated. "Who's there?" she called out, her voice trembling, swallowed by the darkness. Outside, nothing. Holding her breath, she turned the knob slowly and opened the door. What she saw made her doubt reality itself. Standing there, motionless, was a giant brown bear, completely covered in ice. It looked like a living statue, frozen in time. Ice clung to every inch of its fur, dripping from its paws like jagged icicles. But the strangest thing wasn't the ice. It was its position. One paw was raised, as if it had just been about to knock again before freezing solid. Helena stepped back, unable to breathe. The bear did not move, but its eyes buried under a thin layer of frost seemed alive, and stranger still, they were looking right at her. Time stood still. Snow drifted gently around the motionless creature, like a ghostly veil wrapping the scene. Helena's flashlight shook in her hand, the beam trembling over the surreal figure in front of her. The bear was enormous, impossible, more like something pulled from a nightmare than the real world. Every detail demanded attention: the curved claws, the thick fur buried under glassy ice, the way it stood frozen, yet upright. No living thing should be able to stay like that. Not in this cold. Not for this long. And yet, here it was, still towering, as if it had knocked on her door, and froze mid-act. Helena couldn't move. Fear pulsed inside her like a second heartbeat, but something else held her still too, something stranger than fear. Curiosity, pity, recognition. Maybe it was the loneliness speaking. Maybe it was something deeper, something older, because now as she stared into the eyes buried beneath that frost, she felt certainty. The eyes were alive. Inside that frozen shell was something not just surviving but waiting, and the most terrifying part was how human that gaze felt. Not wild, not beastly. Human, desperate, pleading. The wind whipped up again, stinging her cheeks and pushing snow into her cabin. She could have closed the door, locked it, pretended this wasn't happening, but instead she took a step forward. Just one. She raised the flashlight, shining it across the bear's face. Cracks spread slowly through the ice that coated its fur, faint little splinters catching the light like diamonds. The lifted paw shuddered ever so slightly, as if it were trying to finish what it started. Helena felt something stir inside her chest. something painful and protective. "This is insane," she whispered to herself, tears forming in her eyes. This isn't real, but it was. Another gust of wind blasted through the trees. The bear tilted just slightly forward, and its heavy paw tapped against the doorframe. Thump, a sound so hollow it felt like the last heartbeat of hope. Helena shuddered. She wanted to run, but instead she stood her ground, her heart aching. She didn't understand it, but she could feel it. This wasn't just an animal. It had come to her. For her. "You came here for a reason, didn't you?" she whispered. Letting the flashlight fall to the floor, she stepped to the threshold, and gently, recklessly she pressed her hands to the ice. It burned, the fur beneath was frozen stiff, but she could feel the pulse inside it. This was whisper her. That she could feel the pulse inside it, but she could feel the flashlight. She stepped to the threshold, and gently, recklessly, she pressed her hands to the ice. A tear slipped down her cheek, not from fear, from knowing somehow her life was about to change forever. She opened the door wider. The snow came howling in, like nature itself had been holding its breath and now let go, and the bear, with a groan of strained ice and old pain, collapsed forward. Its frozen weight slammed to the wooden floor with a heavy thud. Ice shards exploded in all directions. The whole house shuddered. Helena dropped to her knees beside it, panting, stunned. She didn't know it yet, but in that moment, when she pulled open her door to a frozen bear, she had also opened a door to an ancient curse. Helena knelt beside the massive body, her breath catching in her throat. The bear was still moving, but the air around it buzzed with something strange, not just cold. Something ancient, heavy, alive. Alive, 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 alive and known. When she pulled open her door to a frozen bear, she had also opened a knoll beside the massive body, her breath catching in her throat. The bear was still moving, but the air around it buzzed with something strange, not just cold. Something the icy ancient. Chill coming off its fur was unreal, like standing next to a block of death itself. Even with the door now shut, the temperature in the room had plummeted. Her fingers went numb just hovering near it. She should have run. Slammed the door, hidden under blankets, and waited for the madness to pass. But something deeper pushed her to act, a whisper that came from somewhere past fear, past logic. Help him. Without thinking, she stood and dragged the old portable heater across the cabin floor, placing it as close as she could. She turned it all the way up, the coils glowing orange, humming faintly. Then she ran to the fireplace, throwing in more logs, pouring out the last of her lighter fluid. The flames leapt up in a fury, crackling like they sensed the urgency. The heat began to spread, but the bear remained still, frozen in time. Helena sat beside it, arms wrapped around her knees, watching the ice slowly start to melt. Water trickled off the fur, forming puddles across the floor. Shards of ice snapped and popped as they fell away, revealing bits of dark brown beneath. She couldn't take her eyes off it. It was like watching a glacier come alive. Part of her waited for the bear to spring up, wild and violent, but a deeper part, one she didn't understand, knew that wouldn't happen. This creature was not a threat. This creature was in pain. Hours passed, maybe more. The heater hummed. The fire burned. The ice continued to melt. And then a sound, a breath, raspy, shaky, like it came from lungs that hadn't been used in centuries. Helena froze. Her eyes locked on the bear's chest. It moved, slowly, painfully. It rose and fell, another breath, then another. She scooted closer, cautiously, every nerve in her body screaming and straining. And that's when she saw it. The eyes, they opened, and they were not the eyes of a wild animal. They were human, old, full of sorrow, tired, in a way that sleep could never fix. The flashlight gasped. They on the ground, casting a dim, flickering beam across the cabin in its pale light. She saw the impossible truth. The bear, this creature, was looking at her, not with instinct, with memory. And then something else, A tear. A tear. Listen. Yells a tear. One single tear rolled from the corner of its eye, carving a path through the melting frost. Helena felt her heart break in silence. The bear, whatever it was, let out a low, broken groan. It sounded less like a growl and more like a voice choked with years of trying not to speak. And then, it spoke, barely a whisper. You heard me. The words sent a chill through Helena that had nothing to do with the cold. Her mouth hung open. She couldn't move. Couldn't think. Couldn't think. She had pulled a frozen bear into her home. And now it was talking to her. Helena couldn't answer. How could she? The frozen bear, half thawed, still dripping with melting ice, had just spoken. Not with growls or animal sounds. With words, coherent, broken, human words. You heard me. The voice was gravelly, worn from ages of silence. It sounded like it had been pulled from the depths of the earth, and yet it was unmistakably real. Helena slowly moved closer, heart pounding so hard it hurt. What are you? She whispered. What is happening? The creature didn't answer right away. His body shook slightly, like every breath was a battle. The warmth in the room had grown, the fire now roaring, heaters buzzing like insects, and still the chill from his body lingered. He carried the cold inside him. Then, with great effort, he lifted his head and spoke again. The creature didn't answer right away. His body shook slightly, like every breath was a battle. The warmth in the room had grown, the fire now roaring, the chill from his body lingers. Hikari vestus bajolosi, Vajur ojer. My name was Burn. Helena stared, stunned. That name, it felt like it came from another world, another time. A time she somehow already knew even if she'd never heard it before. You were a man? She asked, barely able to believe the words coming from her own mouth. The bear nodded weakly, the ice clinging to his fur cracked again, for lay away in sheets. I was. Long ago, before the curse. That word hit her like a stone. Curse. Long ago like a stone. Curse. Churs yith dever hers hispers her howard, nither believe the words coming from her whole mouth o believe the words the wills mange. Everything suddenly shifted. The impossible moment became ancient, heavy with something more than just magic. This was bigger than her, older than her. It felt fated. Björn groaned as though the memory itself pained him. I was betrayed. For love, for honor, for blood, I was cursed, to live as neither man nor beast. Trapped, lost, until someone heard me. He coughed, his breath misting. In the warm air, ice water trickled down from his shoulders. His breath, steam rose from his back as he thawed, piece by piece. For centuries I was frost and shadow, waiting, hoping. But no one ever opened the door. Helena lowered herself to the floor, staring at him in disbelief. She wasn't just witnessing a miracle, she was part of it. Why me? She asked. Why now? Björn's eyes met hers. They were full of centuries, of pain, of longing, and now of recognition. Because the curse was tied to her. Akiosh, the curse was tied to her. Stithena lowered herself to the floor, staring at him in disbelief. She wasn't just why now. Björn's eyes met now. Björn's eyes met nas was missing a miracle. The witch who cast it. They were full of centuries. She was your blood. Of pain. Helena blinked. Of longing. Her. And now. The one who cursed recognition. Me. Björn said softly. Because she called herself the Winter Mother. Her power, her bloodline. It runs through you. A chill ran up Helena's spine. Far deeper than the cold in the room. Something about it rang true. Her grandmother's cryptic warnings. The way her family always feared the cold, the forest, the snow, it was all connected. Björn nodded. slowly reading her expression. She was all leading, her expression, far deeper than the cold in the room. Something about it ran trends, the way deeper than the cold in the room, spurts, the far deeper than the cold in the room. You carry her gift and her burden. Helena stared into the fire, her thoughts spiraling. So, what happens now? Björn closed his eyes, his body still trembling. Now, I show you what came before. Helena didn't have time to ask what he meant, because in the next heartbeat, the world around her collapsed into darkness and she began to see through his eyes. The floor beneath Helena vanished. The warmth of the fire, the hum of the heater, the weight of the moment, all of it, dissolved into a vast, endless black. She wasn't falling. She wasn't floating. She was being pulled. And then, the cold returned, but not the cold of her cabin. This was deeper, heavier. It wrapped around her like a shroud, not just on her skin but inside her soul. When her eyes opened again, she wasn't in the world out of time. She was standing in a world out of time. A land of eternal winter. Mountains loomed in the distance, cloaked in ice. Thick forests surrounded a snowy valley. The sky above was gray, like it hadn't seen sunlight in centuries. She saw people, warriors, a village, built from timber and stone, smoke rising from longhouses. And in the center of it all stood a man, Björn, not as a bear, but fully human, powerful, proud. His golden hair fell past his shoulders, and a massive sword rested on his back. He stood before a gathering of warriors, speaking with strength, his people listening with loyalty in their eyes. Helena wasn't part of this world, just a ghost watching it unfold. But she could feel the weight of it, the honor, the responsibility, the trust his people had in him. Then the vision shifted. Night, snow, betrayal. Björn was now kneeling before a woman draped in furs, her face hidden beneath a dark hood. Helena felt a chill go through her bones. Even in memory, this woman radiated power. Her voice was low, calm like the edge of a blade. You gave your word, the woman said, but you gave your heart to another. Björn didn't argue, he bowed his head. I loved her truthfully, he said, and I will not deny it. The hooded woman the witch lifted, a silver vial in one hand and a dagger of ice in the other. Then let your truth become your prison. She slit her palm, letting blood drip into the vial. The air howled. Snow swirled into a blizzard, unnaturally fast, unnaturally fierce. The trees shook. The earth groaned. She spoke words in a tongue Helena didn't recognize but somehow understood. And with those words, the curse was born. Björn screamed not from pain, but from transformation. His body twisted, bones snapped, fur burst through skin. He roared in agony as the man was torn away, and a bear took his place. Then came ice, then Tedzen. Him ice, torn away, and a bear took his place. Then with those words, the curse was born. Björn screamed not, didn't avenge, but somehow understood. And with this there splurged. The snow turned sharp snapped, and white, fur burst coating him until he was frozen solid. His eyes were still alive but buried in frost, the mange, waiting. The vision shifted again. Helena saw generations pass, women with the same eyes as hers, cold, sharp, powerful. Some were feared, others vanished. They carried the blood of the witch, her blood, the same that now flowed in Helena's veins. And then she saw a little girl, herself in the same woods, her grandmother beside her, grandmother beside her, with the same woods, her grandmother beside her, eyes as her. They carried the same adage, they carried the blood of the witch, her blood, the blood of the witch. The old woman knelt down and whispered words that Helena had long forgotten, but now they echoed loud and clear. One day, winter will knock on your door, child. When it does, do not be afraid to open it. The world shattered again. Helena collapsed onto the wooden floor of her cabin, gasping for air, Her skin was slick with sweat, her hands trembling. She looked up, Björn was watching her, but his eyes were no longer just pleading, they were full of knowing. You saw it, he said. Helena nodded, still shaking. I saw everything. Her voice was barely a whisper. You were a warrior, and she cursed you because she loved you. Björn lowered his head. And now, her blood must decide how the story ends. Helena stood slowly, the weight of generations pressing on her chest. What do I have to do? Björn's answer came gently, but with gravity. Björn's answer came gently, but with gravity. You were a warrior, and she cursed you because she loved you. Björn lowered his head. How the story ends. You have to choose. The cabin was quiet, but the silence pressed on Helena's chest like a stone. She paced back and forth across the wooden floor, her arms crossed tightly, her breath shaky. The fire still burned, and the heater buzzed faintly, but none of it touched the cold that now lived inside her. Björn sat near the fire, no longer a bear, not fully a man. His form shimmered somewhere, in between skin and fur, warmth and ice. But it was his eyes that had changed the most. They no longer looked haunted. They looked hopeful. And that terrified her. She turned to face him. You said, someone in her bloodline has to sacrifice themselves. Yes. What happens if I don't? Björn's shoulders dropped. Then I stay like this, caught in between, alive, but not truly living. The curse holds me forever. Helena swallowed hard. And if I do it, the curse holds me forever. Helena swallowed highs themselves. Yes, yes. What happens if I don't? Björn's shoulders draphize themselves beige. What happens to me? Yes. He looked up slowly, his voice like ash on the wind. You do not die, not in the way you're thinking. But your soul becomes part of the curse. The magic transfers. I am freed. And you are taken, frozen, bound to the spell. Helena took a step back. The words hit her like ice water. She stared at her hands. She could already feel a faint numbness creeping into her fingertips. Was it her imagination, or was the curse already reaching for her? You're asking me to give up my life, she said quietly. No, Björn said, shaking his head. I am not asking, I am telling you the truth. The choice is always yours. The fire crackled. Outside, the wind howled against the walls. Time moved slower. Helena turned toward the window. Snow fell in slow, lazy spirals. Somewhere deep in her chest, she could feel something waking up, something old, something that had been passed down to her like a whisper. She remembered her grandmother's words, her warnings, and the way the forest always seemed to watch her. Maybe it had all been leading to this moment. She looked back at Björn. Do you want to live? He blinked, surprised by the question. Yes, he said. For the first time in centuries, I want to live. Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't let them fall. She nodded once firmly. Finally, leading to this moment. She looked back at Björn. Do you want to live? He blinked, surprised by the question. Yes, he said. For the first time in centuries, I want to live. Then let's end this. By the question. Björn stood slowly, like a great weight was being lifted even before the curse had broken. His form shimmered in the firelight, less bear now, more man. He stepped forward and then dropped to his knees before her. You have to touch me, fully, with intent. Helena hesitated, her hand hovering above his chest. Her body trembled not just with fear, but with the unbearable certainty that nothing would be the same after this. She exhaled. Okay. Her palm pressed against his heart. For a second, nothing. Then light exploded. It wasn't blinding, it was warm. Blinding in its meaning, not its brightness. The cabin was gone. Time unraveled. Sound vanished. All that remained was change. Helena felt her soul lift. She was leaving. Not dying, transforming. The curse was shifting from him to her, and then she broke. Not in pain, in release. In the giving, the light vanished. In the given, the light vanished. The cabin was gone. It was but that remained was change. Helena felt her soul lift. She was leaving, not dying trench. While there was change, silence returned, thick and absolute. Not the kind of silence that falls after a storm has taken everything. Helena crumpled to her knees. The warmth was gone. Her breath clouded the air. The cold had returned, but it was no longer just in the room, it was inside her. She gasped, eyes wide, staring at her hands. Her skin was pale, bluish. Crystalline veins pulsed under the surface, and her fingertips had already gone numb. "No," she whispered. A sound broke through the stillness. A breath, but not hers. She turned, slowly terrified of what she'd see. And there he was, Björn, standing, human, fully, no flaws, no traces of the curse, just a man barefoot, shivering, blinking in disbelief, as if experiencing life for the very first time, his face twisted with emotion the second he saw her. "Helena," he breathed, stepping toward her, awe and horror mixing in his voice. You did it." But Helena didn't speak. She couldn't. Her lips wouldn't move. Her limbs were growing heavier by the second. Her knees buckled beneath her as ice raced up her body from the floor. Björn dropped to his knees in front of her. "No, no, please no." He reached for her hands, but her skin was already hardening, cool to the touch, turning glassy. Her eyes were open, still locked on his, still watching, but her body was stiff. Her knees, but her body was stiff. Her tears had frozen mid-fall, crystal streaks on her cheeks. He held her close, his forehead pressed to hers. "I didn't know. I thought it would end the curse, not take you." But deep down, Helena had known. She'd always known. She had never truly believed this story would end in rescue, not for her. It had always felt like her part was to open the door, to be the one who made the final choice. Björn sobbed, but Helena, frozen, still was peaceful. Not afraid. Not afraid, she'd always known. She'd never truly believed this story would end in rescue, not for her. It had always felt like her was known, not in pain. In that final moment, her eyes told him everything. She chose this, and then she was still. Her body transformed fully into a sculpture of pure, glimmering ice, silent, beautiful, timeless. Björn held her tears, spilling freely now, his newly human body trembling with helplessness. The curse was broken, but its price had been everything. The sun rose behind the snow-covered mountains, casting long golden rays across the frozen forest. But Björn did not feel the warmth. He walked slowly, step by heavy step, wrapped in a patchwork of furs and silence. In his arms, he carried Helena, not the woman he had known, but a figure of ice perfect, still, and unbearably beautiful. She weighed almost nothing, yet he felt like he was carrying the whole world. The wind whispered through the trees as he made his way down through valleys and frozen rivers, across wilderness and ruin. He didn't stop, not once. Not to eat, not to sleep, not even to breathe deeply. He moved as though fate itself pulled him forward. By dusk, a village appeared, small, quiet, tucked between two cliffs, smoke curled from chimneys. Children played in the snow. It was a place lost in time. Björn stepped into the village square, his boots crunching through ice. People turned. A woman gasped, dropping her basket. A man lowered his axe, staring. A dog whimpered and backed away. A dog wavered and spat as the smoke wings nij. Children played in the snow. It was a place lost in time. Björn stepped into the village square, his quotes crunching through ice. People turpined. A wowage his apst, dropping hers. And yet no one spoke, because what they saw was not a man. What they saw was something older, a soul returned from myth, a giant of sorrow, a legend made flesh. And in his arms a girl made of winter, Björn walked to the center of the village and knelt down, slowly placing Helena with great care upon the stone steps of the old church. The bells above hadn't rung in decades, but as her body touched the ground, donji. Then another, dongjong. Then another, dong dong, dong, dong. Then another, dong dong, dong, dong. The wind shifted. The air grew still. Snowflakes hovered mid-fall as if the world had paused to listen. Björn stood tall. His voice was quiet, but it carried like thunder through the silence. She saved me. The villagers listened, frozen in place. She gave everything. So I could live. So I could remember what it meant to be human. He looked down at Helena, his voice breaking. Now, I will find a way to save her. And then, without another word, he lifted her again. He did not ask for help. He did not explain. He turned toward the mountains and walked into the falling snow. Some say he was never seen again. Others claim he visits once a year, always during the first snowfall, leaving no trace but footprints and frost. But one story remains. On the coldest night of the year, if you listen closely, you might hear a single knock at your door. Just one. And if you're brave enough to open it, you might find winter waiting to be forgiven.